Good morning, everyone. I'm Audrey Boisno with Kevin Casey, and today we are joined by Brian Levy. Brian, welcome.
Hey, Audrey. Thanks for having me again. I appreciate it. Always good to see you and Kevin.
Yeah, very good to see you and Kevin. And actually, we may see you in person soon because you are going to be speaking with Rob Chrisman at the Camp Newport Beach conference that's coming up August 4th through the 6th.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think I'm speaking on the 6th. Yep.
Yep. Do you know what you're talking about yet? Or are you going to just wing it and decide?
Oh, there's nothing to talk about, Audrey. I don't know. We're struggling with the topic right now. No, we've got all kinds of things to talk about. All the regulatory happenings and all the things going on with interest rates. No, Rob and I are going to figure something out.
Yeah, you will. Never a dull moment in the mortgage business. So you'll have plenty of options. Interesting. It'll be that camp event. The insurance commissioner for the state of California was going to be speaking there, and that will be interesting and a great opportunity to, maybe climb a little more into the brain of the person who's impacting all of us in so many ways. And they're doing free CE. That'd be continuing education for people not familiar with the acronym. See how I caught that one myself, Kevin?
Yes, I did. That was impressive.
Yeah, he's usually the acronym police. So anyway.
I don't remember which conference it was. I've been to a lot in the spring, in the early summer, but I think I did see the California Insurance Commissioner speak at one of those conferences.
Oh.
And she's very impressive, and she's very
it's a he.
Well, then maybe I saw a deputy.
Okay. Or a different state.
But they were certainly very in tune with the concerns of consumers and lenders with the insurance costs going up so high, and not just California, but in many other states.
Yeah, no, lots of states.
I think that'll be a real exciting person to hear from.
Me too. I'm very interested in that.
We got to give kudos to Jason for securing that slot.
Yeah. Jason Bellevue, who's the guy who does our our YouTube channel, and he's currently in a top spot in the camp lineup as far as leaders go. He's the one who nailed that down. It took him a long time, and he got it done. We're really impressed by that. So, also want to note that we are part of Chrisman Commentary expanded media offering, and we're the official Tuesday show. So Chrisman Commentary is, as most of you know, is Rob Chrisman's contribution to the mortgage industry that he produces 6 days a week. Holy guacamole. If you're not reading it, you should. So for goodness sake, go sign up. In the next few weeks, there will be a website where everything will be come together, as far as you'll be able to see what shows are happening on whatever day. Covers a wide variety of different aspects of the mortgage industry, and people like you, Brian, will be writing pieces that will be part of this and posted on the website. They're planning to put together an industry event calendar, which I was telling Brian before we started. Kevin, you will remember this. I suggested this like 5 or 6 years ago, and we could never get anyone to think that was a great idea. So I love that that's going to be part of this. So anyway, we are the originator part of the Chrisman Commentary lineup, which we're really excited about and happy about. So anyway, there you go. How about that?
Be fun work with you, Brian.
Brian's like, look,
Brian knows what he wants to talk about.
I'm a little nervous because I don't know what's coming at me first. But no, I mean, I'm actually kind of excited about what the Chrisman folks are doing.
Me too.
I've probably gotten a large majority of the people that subscribe to my mortgage musings through the Chrisman Commentary. So there's a lot of overlap between my readers and the Chrisman Commentary readers. And if anybody on this podcast wants to, or webcast, whatever we call this,
whatever this is,
you are more than welcome to sign up for my mortgage musings as well. It's a free subscription, and I just send you an email whenever I post a new one, or you can just go to the www.mortgagemusings.com and sign yourself up or look at past editions.
So let me just tell you, we are going to talk about your mortgage musings today. And I was saying earlier that I have to actually pay attention when I'm reading them. Like, it's not light reading. It is, and I think Brian probably thinks it is. I think he's thinking that he's really lightened up these topics and it's so easy to understand. And people buckle up because you got to pay attention. But it's really interesting to hear his perspective on these different topics. Being explain to everyone what your job is, just so I don't muck it up.
Well, I mean, in terms of what I'm trying to accomplish with the mortgage musings, I mean, frankly, you can go as deep as you want. I'm hoping to provide some level of levity and education at the same time in a read that's not going to be a chore for somebody. But like I said, if you want to drill deeper, I'm going to give you the tools to drill deeper on any particular topic. I'm going to give you my thoughts on something that's topical. And hopefully you might, get a slightly different perspective or get a new idea, or maybe you'll blatantly disagree and you'll, send me an email and let me know. But I guess the point is to just educate and have an outlet for all the weird stuff that's going on in here.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's just start with some of the things that are going on in the mortgage industry in general. So it's interesting to note that next week we have some pretty important things going on, like, PCE is coming out a week from Friday. And we have a lot of the jobs numbers that are quantified by the entity that actually seems to get the numbers right versus the BLS, which as we're all clear on, I am not a fan of. So there are some important things coming down the pike, but in the meantime, we are getting some pretty clear messaging from the Fed that they are getting more and more comfortable with the trajectory of inflation, and that we are not that we're going to be there this year to the 2% core PCE number they're looking for, but we're headed that direction and they are feeling comfort. So so they're feeling better. It's looking like maybe we'll have a cut in September, but we'll see. I mean, as we always point out, anything could happen, and then screech, it all goes sideways, and what you thought was about to occur doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything can. That's why. What do I have to wait till September though? What's up with
Well,
that?
okay, so so it's interesting as Powell is talking about this. It keeps him up at night. He's worried about cutting too soon, and he's worried about waiting too long. So if you will take a little meander back to transitory inflation, remember that little thing?
Huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that ended
They
up
waited too long.
they waited way too long and they completely missed the boat on that. So I think they're worried about doing the same and causing even more problems. So do you have any thoughts on this, Brian?
I don't know a heck of a lot about, interest rates. I tend to leave that kind of stuff to the Rob Chrisman of the world. But I mean, you said BLS. I mean, my initials are BSL, so I thought that's what you were talking about.
Bureau of Labor Statistics. Sorry about that. Bureau, yeah, they are something else. Boy, they are having a rough time getting their numbers even close. I mean,
No, but I think I mean, look, I've even done a musing about inflation. Um, so much of it is psychological, and they're trying to stay ahead of where the sort of the economy is going. It's the Wayne Gretzky theory of, skating to where the puck is going to be, not where it is. And
right,
so,
right.
anyway, I'm in no position to second guess what, the eggheads on the Fed can figure out with all their models. My clients would very much like interest rates to be lower. That's all I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, okay. So BLS has on average overstated the jobs numbers by 50,000 per month just this year. The
Yeah, I
Philly
thought it was closer to 90.
Philly Fed says BLS overstated by 521,000 jobs just in Q4 of last year. So the jobs numbers we're getting have been a little rough, to put it mildly. And so it is just, again, it is a function of, on June 24th, we'll get the QCEW's numbers, and they're the ones, those are the real numbers. July 31st is the next Fed meeting. and in between we'll get PCE. So anyway, that's it. It'll be interesting to see. But like today we got retail sales numbers and they came in a little better than expected. But if you take a dive into that, it's really the higher end that's driving those numbers. And the average person is really struggling and feeling the pinch. So it is very, very important that, we know that you can't guess. And Rob actually refrains more than anyone, Rob Chrisman, from trying to tell everyone what's coming next. He repeats what's happening. He tells us what's going on, which is critically important, but he's not trying to prognosticate, which is good because most of them get it wrong. So with that being said, Brian, let's get started. There's so many things going on that impact the mortgage business at a regulatory and sometimes legislative level. I want to start with this thing called the Chevron Deference. So whether or not the court defers to an agency's answer or interpretation on a given topic. So can you explain what that means and then how it applies to us and what's been happening lately?
Yeah, so I mean, actually, the headline news is Chevron deference is no longer the law of the land. Chevron has nothing to do with an oil and gas matter. It has to do with a administrative law principle that said that when an agency interprets a statute, that the court is supposed to give it deference, meaning, whatever, if the agency's not, totally ridiculous, then it doesn't matter what their view of that interpretation is. And in fact, their interpretation could flip-flop from administration to administration, but as long as it's reasonable, the court is going to defer to it if somebody challenges it. That is no longer the law of the land. That was just recently overturned by the Supreme Court in a case, actually in two cases. Loper Bright is sort of the name of the case, but in any event, that is now something that courts will have to look at entirely new. They're going to say, well, is this a good interpretation of the law, as opposed to what did the regulator have to say about it, and then we're just going to go with that.
So let me summarize this in what I would say is layman's language. So Congress enacts a law, it gets passed, the president signs it, and they basically create, let's say, CFPB. But then the CFPB comes along and says, well, we've been given these rules and regulations, and now it's up to us to interpret how to enforce them and what they mean. And so then they create a bunch of rules and regulations within the CFPB. And that is what they're referring to as the Chevron, and the fact that the agency is kind of making up rules and regulations. It wasn't Congress that made the rules. They gave them guidelines, but the agencies are making the rules. Am I correct? And then they're also enforcing the rules.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop the agencies from making rules.
Okay.
Let me be clear about that. It just means that if there's a dispute about what the words mean, that the court is going to say, we're not going to just accept whatever the agency says. We're going to look at this fresh with our own eyes, because we're the court. We know what words mean. We're lawyers. We're the judges. We know what words mean. Agencies are not experts in interpreting words.
Okay.
So this goes, okay, so first of all, let me ask, does this also apply to state agencies or is it just federal agencies?
This is federal law.
Just federal
agencies. States will have their own standards of review, some of which may follow the federal standard and others which may say, no, we want to defer to agency interpretations.
So you can have the CFPB that now has to deal with this, but you can have a state agency in a state that can just do whatever they want and that wouldn't necessarily apply to them.
So this was an interpretation under the Administrative Procedures Act, which is the law that sort of enables all federal agencies. There's going to be separate state laws that enable whatever agency, your state environmental protection agency or whatever it is. That's all going to be governed by your state law and your state constitution.
Right. Okay. Well, I think what I was thinking in my head when I was asking the question is, we've got the CFPB, but like in California, we also have the DRE, the Department of Real Estate, and the DFPI, the Department of Financial and innovation. What the hell is it, Kevin?
Exactly that one.
Yeah, DFPI, Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. That's it. Okay, so anyway, so they do their own thing big time. And so if the CFPB isn't enacting a bunch of things, then the state agencies do step in and do their own version of what they think should be correct. So let's just stick with the CFPB, since that correct, I would imagine, is what is most impacted here. Yes.
Mhm.
So
Well, for our business, certainly, yeah.
how will this impact what they do and what we should expect from them? If anything.
So I think it remains to be seen. I actually think that the impact is going to be most immediately felt in enforcement actions. So when the agency is using an aggressive interpretation for enforcement purposes, which has been happening fairly frequently occasion, it's that the defendant can now say, well, your interpretation is when you're negotiating with an agency and they're saying, well, our interpretation is the one that's going to control because we have Chevron deference, that makes it very tough for you as a defendant to say, well, I'd like a second opinion. I want to know what the judge has to say about it. Now that defendant can say, yeah, I disagree with your interpretation. We'll see what the judge has to say about it. So it's a much more equal footing, I guess, if you're in that kind of a situation. I mean, frankly, you've got to be willing to spend a lot of money and legal resources to try and defend yourself in any kind of an enforcement action against the federal government. But I think that's where it will most immediately be seen. Challenging the regulations and challenging the interpretations is more difficult if you don't have sort of some immediate action that's adversely affecting you because of that regulation.
Like what?
Like in Loper Bright, they had to pay for these inspectors that were on the fishing boats that they were. The Commerce Department had made this rule and said, you have to have an inspector on your fishing boat and you have to pay the cost of the inspector. And they said, wait a minute, where's that in the regulation? And that's went all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said,
oh, wow.
Yeah, that's not
started from a fishing boat.
Yeah.
Oh, that is fascinating. Wow.
In fact, the story actually, I don't know if you remember that movie with there was
Coda.
Coda, exactly.
Yes, I love that movie.
Yeah. So that's the fishing boat issue.
No kidding. Oh my God. See, it all circles back and connects, doesn't it?
Now the law gets exciting. Now you can tie it to popular culture. And see, that's what I try and do in the musings. I try to relate to things, but I didn't talk about Coda. And
great. That was a great movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. And if you like music, you'll be in heaven. It's just so well done. Oh my God. Okay, so back to the CFPB. Yeah. So now they can't just say, hey, this is what it is because we said it is. It has to, is that it?
No, they're still going to do that. I just think that all I'm saying is that the industry now has more tools to be able to say, we think you're wrong and we're going to push back.
Is it okay? So here's a question. So in the beginning, when they really were, I mean, my opinion of them has changed tremendously in the last 12 years or however long it's been, because they were in the beginning, they were a nightmare. Can someone go back? How far back could you go back and appeal a ruling that they did and a fine that they may have levied? You know, wait, I shouldn't have had to pay that $20 million fine. I mean, is that going to happen? Can any of these lenders go back and say, nope, I disagree, and then fight it backwards?
You know, one of the things that also came down from the Supreme Court this past term was a case in asking the question of when does the statute of limitations begin to run on an agency action? And the agencies were saying, well, it's 6 years or whatever the time period is from when we issue the rule or we make the statement. And the Supreme Court said, nope, it's from when the business or party is aggrieved. So it could be in the future that there's a business that says, I am going to be aggrieved by RESPA or something. I'm making something up. And, that is whatever this interpretation is, I want to challenge it.
So you could look forward and think, oh, this is going to be a problem for me and then challenge it? Or you have to wait till you've been
No, no, I mean, you can't look, I'm not saying you look forward. You asked me when the
But going
statute, when
forward,
can you challenge? And my point is, you can challenge a regulation at any time. Your particular circumstances may be foreclosed, but somebody else's may not have even started yet.
Well, right. Okay, I get that. I was just wondering if some of the places that had paid humongous fines could go backwards and go, I want to fight that. I don't agree.
No, see, so now so many of the cases involving the CFPB were consent orders. So when a consent order is a voluntary agreement between
Ah,
you and the
okay.
enforcement agency.
yeah, see, Audrey,
Okay.
how it works is if you disagree, the fine goes up by 10 times, so you would want to agree.
Yeah, they have, sort of massive powers and penalties.
Yes, they do.
If you lose in court, it's bad
Yeah,
to the CFPB or to pretty much any time you're litigating with the federal government on anything.
Interesting. Okay, so here we are in July, and we are looking at, so that was a Supreme Court ruling, but if we end up with an administration change in November, does it unwind all of this stuff, or what happens? Does anything happen?
Well, I think first of all, the law doesn't change at all. Okay.
Right.
You change the players, but not the game. The question is, what would happen to how the CFPB enforces its laws, what it wants to do about the various laws that it's proposing, that are in various stages of proposed rules and implementing different things. The director serves at the pleasure of the president. I can't imagine that if the Democrats win, that they're going to change the CFPB director in the next term. If the Republicans win, I think it's fairly likely that they would change who they would put in there, what their philosophies would be, how they would impact the CFPB's actions. I just have no idea at this point.
All right. Well, and again, I think what we have found in the past is when the state agencies feel that the CFPB isn't being run by a strong enough arm, then they feel like they should step things up and take care of that. That's
depending on the state.
Yeah,
depending on
I
the
was just going to
state.
say, I mean,
Exactly.
certainly a state like California, a state like New York, you're 100% correct. They want
Probably
to see
Washington
aggressive
State.
enforcement. But, I'm not going to name another state, but there are other states that, they administer their laws the way they administer them, and they're pretty happy with how they do it.
Right, right. Interesting. So as far as the impact on how the CFPB is going to do business based on this new ruling, do you see them changing their approach, or do you think they will just let it play itself out?
Well, look, we're sitting here, it's July, the election is November. What I'm seeing from the CFPB is they are fast and furious coming out with as much as they can right now. There's, so many new proposals that have just come out. The servicing proposal just came out. I'd say it was a little half-baked because the LEP stuff wasn't even, they didn't even give language for the LEP stuff.
LEP, limited English proficiency?
Yes, this is all related to servicing and changes to Reg X as it governs servicing, default servicing, foreclosures. There's a lot of detail in there. I won't, spend time talking about it, but it just seems to me that the CFPB is trying to do as much as they can. Junk fee initiative, a lot of it's political, trying to show that, they're doing something to help borrowers, they're doing something to help consumers, and how much of it is going to stick, how much of it is going to just set the agenda for the next term if the Democrats win. I don't really know. I know that the Mortgage Bankers Association is very busy responding to all kinds of, requests for comment and proposed rule, comment periods. I mean, there's just a lot of action right now going on in terms of what the CFPB is doing and the industry reaction to it.
Okay, so Bill made a comment. Brian, won't this Chevron ruling by the Supreme Court result in much more litigation? Also, won't this create much uncertainty from a business perspective?
So those are good points. I don't know the answer if it's going to create more litigation. Like I said, I think it's just going to level the playing field a little bit in terms of negotiations in settlement discussions. It was interesting. The Townstone decision, which I know we want to get to, which came out of the Seventh Circuit, was decided after the Loper-Bright elimination, or the tombstone was placed on the Chevron Deference doctrine. Those judges said, even looking at their facts with the Chevron Deference gone, they decided to go with the CFPB's interpretation. Whereas the lower court had said, applying Chevron deference, that it was an unreasonable interpretation. So, I mean, Chevron may have been dead for a long time, and judges sort of were applying their own interpretation anyways. And so some people I've heard refer to it as zombie precedent. It wasn't really, judges weren't really applying Chevron anyways. So that being the case, I don't think you're going to see a heck of a lot of changes in the context of litigation, but I do think it will provide more discussion points for future settlement discussions.
Okay, so let's talk about the CFPB versus Townstone thing for a minute. So this is a case that we'd heard about over the last few years, and you want to talk about high level, the synopsis we had been given had given us one impression, and your take on it is very different than that. So can you explain what the case was, and how it impacts us, and how it trickles down to all of us in the mortgage business?
Yeah, I'm not going to probably do justice to describing the case properly. But what I would say is, first of all, it's the first time that the CFPB has actually filed a lawsuit against a mortgage originator for discrimination. Okay, all those other fair lending cases that you read about and you hear about and you see, they've all been settlements, every single one of them. So this is the first time that it actually went to court. And so there was a lot of issues that were on the table. One issue that I don't, is sort of the fundamental question, I think, for sort of lay people is, well, what did the guy do? Well, how did he discriminate? And the allegation in the case is that he discriminated against, quote unquote, prospective applicants, not his applicants, not people that showed up and said, I'd like a loan, and they said, well, what's your race? We can't make loans to certain races. No, that's not what happened. What he did was he had a radio show in Chicago that was on like Sunday morning, and I think it was on kind of the conservative radio channels and AM radio, and it was
well, therefore he's already knocking off all the poor people because they don't listen to conservative.
Well, so that was sort of part of it, but the allegations were that in the course of his weekly radio show, that, and it was also about mortgages and mortgage lending in Chicago, and that there was some racially charged, racially insensitive comments that the mortgage originator had made about various neighborhoods or places in Chicago. that would tend to discourage applicants, prospective applicants. Okay, so just to be clear, we're not talking about what actually were the comments. We're just talking about the question that went up to the Seventh Circuit was, does the Equal Credit Opportunity Act cover prospective applicants? That's the only issue.
Oh, that's an interesting question.
All that other stuff, that wasn't before the Seventh Circuit in this most recent reversal.
Interesting.
The only question was, does ECOA cover prospective applicants? The lower court said no, applying Chevron Deference. It does not cover prospective applicants. That interpretation is unreasonable. The Seventh Circuit 3-judge panel said, we disagree. We think it does cover prospective applicants. Sent it back down to the court and said, apply this against whatever the facts are of this case. Was there discrimination against prospective applicants? Were they discouraged by the comments that were made on this radio show? None of that has been determined yet, but the prospective applicants has. Now, the lawyers for that originator can have two choices. They can either go back and fight on the issue of whether that discouraged, whether that was actual discrimination, or they can go back up to the Supreme Court and try and get the Supreme Court to look at the question of, was the Seventh Circuit right when the lower court said differently? Not the Seventh Circuit disagreed. Maybe they can get the Supreme Court to enter a different opinion about prospective applicants. That's all that happened. Prospective applicants. That was the only thing.
I got to tell you that from my perspective, this is really interesting. Let's start there. It's really interesting because, again, when you Google this case, what pops up is not that at all. It literally tells you that a lot about this originator that apparently is assumed, and you're from that area, so you have some insight into the way that things have been spoken about and we're not going to get into that because we don't have the time nor the wherewithal to get through all that today. But it is very interesting how there's this summary of what this case is about versus what the case is actually about. And if we as originators have to think about prospective borrowers, because who's the harmed party in this situation, right? Like, who did he harm? Well, if they're unnamed people, it's very interesting. And also, I mean, what if I say something, I mean, can you imagine this, Kevin, that offends someone or they're upset by, and then they think that they're a harmed party, then am I responsible for the fact that they didn't apply for a mortgage? And, I mean, how far do we go with this? That's what's in my head.
Audrey, I was having one of those text battles with my friends this morning about news sources, and the kind of way that news sources put their thumb on the scale and filter information to you. I'm very hesitant to make a snap judgment about something based on what a Google search tells me or a DuckDuckGo search tells me. Whatever, I really feel like there's a lack of trustworthy sources for information out there. And I have friends, they say, well, I do my own research. And I go, well, where are you looking?
Yeah, where are you looking?
Like you're kind of caught in one rabbit hole over here, and then you stop, they're accusing me of being in a different rabbit hole. Like you're in your own rabbit hole, Brian, and I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe I am, but I feel like I'm, at least on these kinds of topics, I'm capable of doing my own research. You want to argue with me about whether this Trump assassination attempt was an inside job, or was there some conspiracy around it? I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to wait until I hear more evidence. I'm not ready to jump on that bandwagon. I'm not going to totally discount anything, but I'm also, just withholding judgment. But I have an open mind, and
but here's the issue. So we talk about this constantly on here, that you've got to read beyond the headline. You have to know who your source is. You need to double check with, or triple check, or mini checks of the information that you're reading, getting, and you have to know how to talk to your borrower about what they're reading, because it is very much the same. It's the headlines, it's the, you know,
Yeah.
off of one news source, etc. But in this situation, I mean, when I Googled this, all that came up, other than the actual legal document, which frankly, I just didn't have time to read, you know, it was nothing like you described. And you're an attorney, so you understand the inside of this in a way that we're not going to, right? So I think it like this kind of conversation is really important because, again, it's a dive with an expert. I mean, not that you're the expert. I'm not pinning that on you. You're not the expert on this case, but you are able to give some perspective that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And I'm just blown away by this in particular, because again, I had an impression of this case. And by the way, again, it's a CFPB versus Townstone. And when you Google that, it does pop up, but but not what you're talking about, that's for sure. So
well, there's public filings of what the alleged statements were. And if somebody wants to go look at that, they can, and they can make their own decisions as to whether those are discriminatory. They can make their own decisions as to whether those are discouraging, because
and by the way, I did.
And you know, those are the kinds of issues that would have to be addressed at the trial court level. This theory that if you're not encouraging applicants in a particular neighborhood, that you're discouraging applicants. That is pretty much the CFPB's position in a lot of these fair lending cases, is that by the failure to have outreach to all communities is a discouraging act. That remains to be decided by a court. But that is their position. And, you know, I mean, whether it's the right thing to do is a different question. Whether it's illegal is the question when you're in court.
So a good example of it, and this is something we talk about when we're teaching our classes, is for loan officers, a lot of them have on the back of their business cards a few items that they need to process a loan. So it'll say, give us the last 2 pay stubs, 2 W-2s, tax returns, and bank statements, and, you know, a couple other little things, and then I can work on your loan, right? And there's 2 interpretations to that. One is that, well, you know, that's a simple way of telling people what paperwork you need to get. But then the other people are saying, well, no, now you're discouraging people from applying because they are self-selecting out of applying because, oh, wait, I don't have 2 pay stubs, or I don't have W-2s, or whatever it is. And wait a minute, but they would qualify for a loan if we just did business statements or something like that. And there's a, you know, a talk of, well, is the loan officer discriminating against people when they do this, or discouraging them from applying by doing this, or is it just starting of a conversation?
Yeah, so I do think that this concept of discouraging is going to have different viewpoints depending on who you're asking.
Yeah.
You know, some folks are going to say, "What? That doesn't discourage me at all. I mean, you know, that doesn't discourage me, even though I don't have W-2s or whatever. You know, it doesn't bother me." And other people might say, "Oh no, that, you know, that makes me feel like I'm not supposed to apply."
Well, I mean, I had a long conversation with our compliance department on this, and so how I always phrase it to clients is, here's the items you would probably like, or how did I phrase it? Say, here's the items you would probably want to give to me, and I leave it on them. And then I'm not saying, here's what you need to give me. I'm saying, here's what you'll probably want to give me. And then that tends to alleviate the, oh, you have to give me 2 W-2s and a pay stubs in order to get a loan.
So here's I'm gonna sort of close the loop on this.
Yeah.
The Chevron deference question. What is Chevron deference? Let's look at the example of this word discourage. Okay. You don't need to be a mortgage expert. You don't need to understand finance and interest rates and mortgage documents and foreclosure process to understand what the word discourage means. Right? That is something So what the Supreme Court said in this Loper-Bright case was, we're going to let judges decide ultimately what discourage means. The CFPB, they're going to come out with their own definition, or they're going to just kind of use a definition that might be expansive. And at some point, a defendant is going to say, I don't think that's discouragement. And this could be happening in the Townstone case if they take it down to the district court level and fight that case there. They'll fight over what discourage means. And the judge there doesn't have to accept the CFPB's position because there's no Chevron deference anymore.
Wow. Interesting. Okay. So interesting. As far as borrowers being discouraged, Fannie Mae did a survey and figured out that 10% or less of people know that they can buy a house using 5% down or less.
What,
And
how about what percent?
10%, only 10% understand that they can buy a house with 5% down or less. Of the people who are actually out shopping for a mortgage, only 1 in 7 know that. And most people, I mean, a large percentage of the people think that you need 15 to 20% out there down. And so again, it's a great reminder to all of us that I do think we need to encourage people to see if they can buy a house. And if they find that, depending on their circumstances, they can't do it now, maybe they can do it later and you can guide them towards that, right? But this is a great opportunity for education. And obviously we should not be discouraging people, but the bottom line is if you want to do a certain type of loan, you are going to need certain kinds of documentation. I just think it's a rabbit hole that we could all get stuck in pretty easily. And then someone's interpretation of discourage or encourage, oh, good God, it kind of freaks me out a little bit. So,
well, I didn't answer the second part of the question of one of your audience members there, which was, could this also be bad for business? And so we tend to your point, you're saying, I don't want to discourage somebody. I want to encourage people, but I don't want to break the law, and I also want to provide information. And so what we have is a lot of bright line rules that we have to apply. TRID, my God, everything is down to the exact, you have to put this here and that there, and you have this many days and that many days. I mean, what you need to do to be compliant. If that can all, sort of be like, well, that's not reasonable. A judge can say that that's not, that's not necessary. Then what is, we don't have the structure that we like, and it could upset the apple cart there. There is a downside, which is to the extent that you like the way the regulations frame your work and your obligations, that may be subject to challenge.
It takes me back a few years when one of the proposals, and I forget where it was coming from, was that they were going to come in and do audits and look at who we're doing loans for and evaluate us that way. And my argument to that was, my business is 100% referral. I do not advertise one single bit. So I don't care who comes through the door, but they have to know somebody who knows me, something like that, right? And so if I'm not marketing to a certain, I don't market. So it's not like I'm marketing to one demographic or another, or on any level, whether it's race or socioeconomic. I don't do any marketing. Not that that's a great thing, by the way, and I understand that, but how would I control who I'm doing loans for when I don't market? And then to Kevin's point, Kevin, you tell them your take on this, because it's
so here's my take on it. I don't discriminate who I do loans for, but I am certain that my borrowers discriminate about who they use as their loan officer. And I have seen it many times where I have tried to work into a minority group and I have been shut down because they don't want to deal with me because I am not of their minority.
Well, and you're a middle-aged white guy, so
yeah, I know.
Whatever.
Well, what can I say?
You lose all credit.
And I will admit there are some advantages to being a middle-aged white guy, because some people will use the middle-aged white guy over someone even of their own minority sometimes. It's quite interesting. But like, we were talking about this, there's this one really small minority group that I seem to have penetrated, And it's quite interesting how I'm getting all these referrals from this group, and I can't even relate them together, but yet these people all come from the same little tiny country in Africa that, most people have never even heard of. And like, how do I have, 6 clients from this country and none of them know each other? It's
That's
really,
really interesting. But
really
again, I think what it comes down to is something that you've pointed out, Kevin, which is the clients choose us. They choose who
yes,
they're
they
going to
do.
work
Yep.
with, and who they want to work with. And we cannot control who decides to work with us. We can encourage and not discourage, but we can't control who picks us. And
Correct.
so to hold us accountable for who's picking us is a little daunting, frankly. Even for the best of us who, I mean, good God, I don't care who, what, when, where, like I'll work with anyone. People are like, who's your, they always want to identify your perfect referral person. Who do you want us to refer? I'm like, nice people. I really don't want to deal with the a-holes. I just don't. Otherwise I'm good. I'll take your credit problems. I'll help you with your employment stuff. I'll do whatever I need to do.
Yeah, I don't care what neighborhood you live in or where
I
you
don't
want to
care where
buy
you
or,
live. I don't care how small your loan amount is. I don't care about any of it. I just don't want to deal with jerks. Really, that's how. And by the way, I've found, because I have clients who will call me and go, hey, so I want to refer my so-and-so to you, but they kind of come with a warning, like, I don't know if I should. I'm like, let me give it a shot. Because most of the time I have a very different experience with them. So anyway, there you go. So that is a tricky topic, and you wouldn't think it has so much hair on it, but it does. And from an originator's point of view, it's a little scary to think that, okay, am I being
well,
encouraging
yeah.
enough? Did I discourage? Like, who knows what discourages someone?
Well, from the global picture, though, from a mortgage, let's say you're a mortgage bank, big, large company, and you're realizing that, hey, I'm not hitting a particular demographic of people, then it's pretty simple for you to recruit loan officers that are bringing into that you can see as a company. You can pull up a loan officer's record of who they're doing loans with, down to what race of people they're doing loans with, right? What age groups, everything. And then you can actually target those loan officers and say, we want to bring you over to our company. So therefore, we are now serving that demographic.
Well, that has been going on for a while. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, our company, where Kevin and I work, it's like a freaking rainbow. It's really kind of beautiful. So it doesn't matter what you want, who you want. We probably have some version of that. And
some version, we got it somewhere.
but it doesn't mean that that person only does loans for that segment of the population.
Correct.
Just like I would never just do loans for white people, somebody who is, anything else is not going to just do loans for that segment of everyone. So anyway, all right, moving right along. I feel like we've beaten the crap out of this topic, but anything else you want to add before we do that, Brian?
If I can just add, look, you are in a business where your compensation is tied to the size of the loan that you generate. And smaller loan sizes are going to be, disproportionately for lower income people, minorities, and others are going to be overrepresented in those amounts. My point is, you have an incentive to work with larger loan sizes and an economic incentive, and it's not something that you probably consciously do. But if you were going to do marketing, you're probably spending more time on the loans that are more profitable for you than less profitable. It's just human nature. So you have this sort of built-in problem that those things are going to be disproportionately questionable under fair lending. But it doesn't have to be that way, but it's just something to keep in your own mind that, hey, maybe I need to always think about, what am I spending my time on? Am I worried about, those kinds of issues? But
well,
it's just part of the compensation story. It's not, I don't have that
Yeah.
And I can turn somebody down, for my business, based on whether I think they're going to pay me.
For whatever reason
It's
you
not
want.
going to be tied to race.
Yeah. You don't have
Yeah,
risk.
well, I will say that I've known a lot of lenders throughout the years who will only do certain loan amounts. They only do jumbo. They won't do anything
Only
less
do
than
20%
$300,000,
down.
whatever. I
Yep.
always want to smack the crap out of them. I just think it is so wrong. And I just want to point out that I did a $114,000 loan in May, closed it. It was a terrible experience, but I did it because it was for my client who needed it, blah, blah, blah. I would never turn that down, even though it is inevitable that those are the toughest deals. But we do them because it's part of the business and it's all evened out by the, $1.2 million loan that you
Yeah,
can
but
knock
at the
out
same
in 2
time,
weeks.
I mean, I have a good example where someone came to me and they wanted I want to say it was like a $40,000 loan amount. And they didn't return my call. Okay. Did I call them a second and third time to follow up with them? No. Now, if they were a $4 million loan, I might have.
Okay, Kevin, that's really
Discrimination.
great that you just admitted that in public. That's really smart. I will also note I'm doing a $35,000 loan right now for a borrower, and I probably talk to him 3 times a day.
Yeah.
So some of us, apparently not Kevin, are doing the right thing by our borrowers and making sure that we are serving all segments of the population. And I would very much encourage everyone to adopt my approach to this and not do it that way. Geez Louise, that's crazy. Okay, with that being said, let's talk about junk fees, because recently I had our little friend at our friend, not little, I don't even know how tall he is, at the CFPB on, and I was on his tail a little bit about junk fees because I said, why are you focused on tiny little things when you've got LLPAs that are driving up the cost of lending for everybody, including, like, I have an investment property right now. I'm going non-QM because the pricing is, I mean, hugely better than a conventional loan, which, by the way, who pays the mortgage payment on an investment property? A renter. So it all trickles down, right? It all trickles down. So if you're charging investors a ton of money, the renters pay for it. If you want to know why our rents have gone up, it probably has something to do with that. So anyway, so I was on him about the junk fees. He acknowledged that, they were trying not to say that appraisals were junk fees, etc. But that conversation got out of hand quick. And I feel like the focus should be on the things that are bigger, like the LLPAs of 7/8 on a freaking loan amount of whatever, and how that impacts the borrowers.
Well, no, that's not a junk fee.
That it is a junk fee and no one wants to acknowledge it. Okay, Brian, I'm gonna shut up. You talk. Okay, we're gonna listen to Brian now.
So I wrote
Brian.
a mortgage musing saying, and the title was, "Are you a junk fee?" And I think that's where this,
Wait, but who is it addressed to? Are you talking to the CFPB?
everybody in the industry, okay, everybody, all the things that go into making a mortgage and
Yeah.
giving a borrower a financing on a home, whether it's starting with, real estate brokers and mortgage originators and appraisers and title insurance and everybody involved in the settlement service business. We all have to provide value to a consumer.
Yep.
Now, the CFPB, they're just, I mean, they're calling everything that we do a junk fee. Okay. And I think it's also very political. We've got an election year here. What is the Biden administration doing about housing costs? Well, we're going after junk fees. Well, what are the junk fees? Well, all these people that are involved in helping you get a house, we think those costs are unnecessary. They're junk. Yeah. Okay, that to me is like we're doing nothing. We can't impact interest rates because we're worried about inflation. We can't impact the cost of housing. We can't do anything about the supply of housing. So this is something we can bang our spoon on our high chair about and complain. I don't. To me, it's kind of going nowhere. But I do think there is an undercurrent here that you can't ignore, and the undercurrent is, what value are you providing for 100 basis points as a loan originator? What value are you providing as a real estate broker for 3% commission on both sides? I mean, you're gonna have to kind of be able to justify that. Hey, here's what I'm doing. I'm doing a lot of work so that you can get in that house. And I think there is a value statement to be made for everybody, frankly. Title insurance, appraisers. I mean, you name it.
Now they're going after the title insurance, saying, "Oh, their fees are outrageous."
Okay, but why the focus on housing when nobody is questioning why it costs $2 million to have an operation, or why an attorney can make, how much did they make? How much did the winners of that the Stitzer
Lawsuit.
Burnett case, how much did those attorneys make? And how do you justify that? Why are they so hyper focused on what are we doing? And by the way, I was way more sympathetic to the burden of an LO piece of the compensation of the puzzle as far as cost goes, until I realized how many IMB owners are flying to dinner in their private jets. I mean, seriously. So when they start talking about LO comp and how much we cost and all this, you know what? How much do all those middle managers, who are they effective? Is there any sort of analysis going on with the productivity of everyone within an organization and whether they're worth it or not? I mean, why this hype? I don't understand how this happened, where all of a sudden we're in the crossfires, and you've got
Audrey,
doctors and
Audrey.
attorneys running amok. No offense, Brian.
There was something that happened in 2008 that caused us to have the Dodd-Frank Act and caused the
Yes.
economy to go into the Great Recession, and
Yes.
we got the blame.
We
Mortgage
did,
industry
even
got the
though
blame.
one could argue that
And
those different
you can-
programs were created by Wall Street, by young people who had no idea about cycles and housing, et cetera. So
It's
yeah,
the mortgage
whatever.
industry from top to bottom. It got the blame.
I
From
understand.
Wall Street,
Actually, I think it was
from
Audrey
Wall
got the
Street
blame.
to the originators, to the whole Big Short story. It's all there for why you are in the target, okay, and will always be in the target until the world forgets about that and we, move on to the next thing. Is there a Consumer Medical Protection Bureau to go after all those medical costs? No.
Nope.
But
Not yet.
that's why they're
Not
not
yet.
going after junk fees in medical. I
Yeah.
mean,
But they will.
you name it.
There should be.
Whatever. We've got a
Yeah,
regulator
Tori says
that's
there
focused
should be,
on
and
the
she is
industry.
correct.
That's
Yeah.
they're going to do something.
All right. So we have solved nothing here other than
Otherwise,
it's a
express
bunch of
your
crap.
frustration and yes.
What
it's always fun.
frustration? It seems completely unfair, but also a disservice to the borrowers, because it breeds a distrust of people in lending. And what they need to know is that they have people like us who are actually taking care of them, looking after them, actually give a crap about their future. And that, in my opinion, all of this fear and all of this spewing of inaccurate information, that discourages borrowers more than anything else. So it is, it's frustrating. It's really frustrating.
Just a quick note to Jan, who asked, how is it that companies can see what the loan officers do and where they get that data? It's called your HMDA data, and all those I don't know how many thousand points of data that are input into the system when you do a loan, down to how many points you charge per loan and how much rate you charge per deal. It's all in there. They can pull it all up and see how many loans you do, how many loans you turn away. Everything is in there. Public record. And who else looks at it? Not just other companies, but attorneys look at it to see if you're discriminating.
That's right. Well, and actually there was an interesting case not too long ago where some group looked at what some publicly published data on what a credit union was doing as far as discrimination. And the CFPB said it wasn't happening. They were not discriminating.
Oh,
but
really?
if you looked at the data that was published.
That one was interesting because I know which one you're talking about. That was the Navy Credit Union.
Oh, really? You had to name them? Because why drag them through the mud again?
Well,
Okay.
Here's the best example of that, because what is it required that you get a loan from the Navy Credit Union? You have to be in the Navy or have a family member.
No, I don't even know that that's true.
Yeah, no, it's true. And so if people were being turned down and they weren't in the Navy and they weren't a member of the credit union, was that discrimination, or was that saying, no, you weren't in the Navy, you can't qualify for a loan, therefore you're declined? I thought that was crazy when I read that at first. It was
The
like,
bottom line was CFPB didn't think they were discriminating.
I know.
But the headlines did, which is not.
Oh, the headlines are all over the place.
We're gonna end this on a high note. Gosh darn it! You ready? Okay.
Go.
Adam Data, they issued their mid-year foreclosure report, and foreclosures were down 4.4% in the first half of 2024 from the first half of 2023.
Wow.
That's really great. Okay.
That's phenomenal.
Here's the other thing. Here's some other good news. So unless you're in Texas or Florida, in which case just cover your ears right now. So the comparisons on the inventory levels this year are being compared to very, very low numbers, right?
Mhm.
So almost a third of those inventory numbers that are looking like they're terrible are from Florida and Texas. But in the Northeast, we're 57% lower than pre-pandemic levels. The Midwest were 49% lower than pre-pandemic levels. So again, we've talked about this like the last 3 weeks, the inventory levels, even though the headlines keep saying that they're like so high and blah, 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 they're not. Okay, that's it. Okay, this was very interesting and exhausting because it was very, like, we had to keep our brains really engaged. And Brian, we thank you for that. And it's really important that we have this insight into what we're reading in the news, because again, you Google this stuff, you're not always going to get the full picture at all.
Yeah, well, that's why I put out the mortgage musings. Hopefully some of your audience will go ahead and subscribe and see
How
what
did
it's
they
all
do
about.
it? Tell us
And
again
again, it's
where they go to do that.
mortgagemusings.com, right?
That's
Just
right.
let him answer.
It's just mortgagemusings.com, and you can sign yourself up and you'll
Yes.
get an email next time I put one out, or you can just browse the past editions by topic.
Yes. Go to his website. He has a lot more hair in his picture there. You got a very
I
summer
did get a
haircut.
haircut recently.
Is it a summer haircut for you, Brian?
Yeah, I like it short. You know, I like it tight to the sides now. My wife's not as happy, but I like it short.
Well, next time you're on, we're gonna have a vote on which way we like your hair. We'll just do a side-by-side comparison. We can all vote, and we'll make your wife happy. Okay. So with all that being said, we will look forward to seeing you in a few weeks, and have a great week, everyone. Thank you so much for being
Great.
here.